So it's kind of another smoothing mechanism, you know, like the traditional way of smoothing something out. Like, you know, for example, I have this momentum indicator down here, and you know, even though I set the period a little higher, up to 21, right, you can still see that, you know, we can see visually that this momentum indicator is kind of sloping down. But we can also see that bar by bar by bar that it's a little jagged. And to kind of prove that point, what I'll do is I'll use the slope solver, and we'll put the slope solver on this momentum indicator, and we'll see how the, you know, on a bar by bar case it's a little jagged. And then we'll put this zero lag EMA in the slope solver, and we'll see that that will help a lot, but it's still occasionally a little jagged. And then I'll show you kind of a third way that you could kind of check to see if, you know, if an indicator or price or something is kind of in it, basically generally moving up, or in a general sense moving down. So, all right. So I already have BloodHound on my chart, and first thing I want to do is give this a name. Alright, so I'm just going to use last week's name and change the date. There we go. Alright, and I'm going to start with a slope solver. And so this will be just the momentum. And alright, I need to switch the indicator over to the momentum. And I changed the default period to 21 on my chart. Alright, so we can see now on the chart let me draw a little arrow on here. You know, so we can see, you know, that, you know, our eyes tell us that generally the momentum is, you know, sloping up right here. But at the same time, as we look at this on a bar by bar situation, right, the momentum, or the our slope solver here is telling us that, yeah, we have a bunch of bars that moved up. You know, like so, but then we had a couple of bars that moved down, and then before the momentum started sloping up again. You know, so you know, so if you're looking for the general direction of, say, like this momentum indicator, or, you know, this works for kind of any indicator, you know, we can see that, you know, how do we find this kind of general direction? You know, how can we kind of build that into our system? You know, because if you're looking at the general direction of this momentum indicator, you know, what happens if your other trading conditions occur, you know, right in these three bars here? You know, so like if your first condition of your general trade setup says, you know, you want your momentum to be in a generally sloping up, and then you're waiting for price to pull back. But of course, when price pulls back, what happens? You know, what happens is all of a sudden, you know, the software, or, you know, the slope solver is telling you, oh, now you're sloping down, which is the wrong direction, and therefore, you know, with computer logic, you know, the computer logic is looking at this kind of down sloping situation here, and it says, well, that, you know, our up sloping condition is no longer true. We're now kind of sloping down, and so therefore, your logic that you're building doesn't occur. So we need kind of another way to kind of generalize another method of generalizing, is the momentum indicator sloping up? And one of those ways is you can put like a moving average on your momentum indicator. And so this white moving average is another zero lag EMA. And so we'll kind of apply that on here and see how that helps. Let's see. So I'm going to copy this and I'll rename this. So we're going to turn this one into the zero lag EMA of the momentum. And now I just need to change my indicators here to reflect that. So I need to go find the zero lag EMA, which is way down at the bottom of the list. And here's a little tip. If you click in here on the indicators and press a letter, so if I press A on my keyboard, see how it jumps me up to the A's real quick. So the way I jumped all the way down to the Z's is I just click on an indicator, any one, I pressed the Z's and it jumped me all the way down to the Z's at the bottom of the list. And there's my zero lag. Alright, so I have it down here at the bottom. And let's see, let me move this out of the way. Yeah, so I am using a zero lag EMA with a 14 period, so that's good. The next step is I'm going to press M to jump up to the M's. Next I need to just single click on the momentum indicator, and next I'm going to nest it. So I'm going to click on the nest input, and so now you can see that will feed the data or the output from the momentum indicator into the zero lag EMA, and that's what I did here on the chart. And I need to change the period of my momentum. I'm using a 21 period on the chart. There we go. And so just to show you, right, this zero lag EMA that I have on momentum, right, we can see here that the input series, I changed it over to the momentum indicator there. And so that's exactly what I did inside of BloodHound. Alright, so now that we have the zero lag EMA and the momentum nested into it, now let's see, okay, since I'm working on the solver tab, I need to turn off this slope solver here. I'm going to turn this off. Okay, so now all we're looking at is just the zero lag momentum slope solver. And so now we can see that did help quite a bit. Now we can see that we're getting a general upslope using the zero lag EMA on top of momentum. Alright, so that did help quite a bit. And let's see, I'm going to kind of fudge around so that I deliberately create at least one bar where the zero lag EMA is kind of sloping down. So let me play with the period here. Alright, I think that'll work, so 12. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm deliberately creating kind of at least one or two down bar sloping condition. That way it actually, I'm going to force the condition to occur so it's a better example. So I'll change this to 12. There we go. Okay. Good. So now we can see that the zero lag EMA did help out quite a bit. We only have 2 bars now where the zero lag moved down a little bit. Maybe I could just change this to a 13. Maybe it'll just give us 1. And all right, I'll keep it 12. So that kind of got us closer, I should say. But still, there's this potential where, using any kind of moving average here, you still could have the potential of a couple of bars sloping in the wrong direction. And, of course, we could just keep, increasing the period of the moving average, but as you know, every time you increase the period of the moving average, well then that just adds more lag in your indicator. And of course, we don't want to add too much lag into our system, so you can't keep increasing the period forever and ever. And I also have, let me turn this solver off. I also have, you can see I have a couple of moving averages on price here as well. So we'll take a look at those as well. So, say maybe part of our, trade setup, is looking for a general, smoothed out direction, a general direction of price. So let me kind of do the same thing for these moving averages on price. Alright, so the first one we'll look at is, once again, the zero lag EMA. And let's see, it is a 14 period. So I need to change my indicator over to the zero lag EMA. And I'm using the default 14 period, so that's good. Alright, so we can see here on the chart that actually the zero lag had a slight downslope right here. Even though we can see that generally price is still kind of moving up, but of course we had a little pullback. And let's see, I think for now I'm just going to remove the blue line is an HMA, and let's see, well, yeah, okay, I think I will show this. I think the HMA kind of exaggerates this new way of generalizing slope a little bit, so I guess I will keep it on there. So I'm going to add another slope solver, and this new one here is going to be set to the HMA. And let's see, the HMA, I have a 15 period on the chart. And of course, so we can see that the same thing happens even with the HMA here. That in a general sense, we can see that price is moving up, but of course on an individual bar by bar situation, we can see that the slope solver is telling us, well, that price did slope down, or I should say our moving averages did slope down. But we know that in a general sense price is still moving up. So moving averages help, they can help, but in some situations, even a moving average still doesn't give you what the eye tells us, right? So here's kind of so now I'm going to get into the technique that I'm going to show you that will even generalize the general direction of a price or some kind of indicator even a little more, a little bit better. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set up a situation where we're looking at, let's see, maybe I want to use a dot. Yeah, I'll use a dot. So we're going to look at the value of an indicator. So I'm going to look at the value of this HMA, right? And I'm using the HMA because we can see how the HMA drastically came up and then pulled back down, right? So it's moving even more dramatically than the zero lag EMA, which is the white moving average. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the value of the EMA to like the value of the EMA 5 bars back. So that would be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? And so when I do that, now I can see, let's see which, I think I want this. So now I can see, oh, no, I didn't want that. I think I want this. So now I can see if I draw a line, you know, right across those dots. You see when I compared, we'll just pretend like this is the current bar. So if I pretend that, if I check the value of the moving average to the value of it 5 bars back, right, you can see from this line that I just drew that it does have an upward slope to it. And so we can kind of use this technique to smooth out price movement even more. So what I'll do is I'll build a couple of solvers that employ this technique of you know, looking at the current bar and comparing the value of like 5 bars back. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the comparison solver. So we're going to compare the value of the HMA, right, of the current bar here, to the value of the HMA 5 bars back. So that's what we're going to do. Alright, so this is going to be our HMA, and it's going to be, let's see, trying to think of a good name. Let's see, 0 bar to the 5th bar, I guess. I try and keep my names kind of short here. Alright, so now I have to switch both my indicator A and indicator B over to the HMA. And I'm using a 15 period. And I have to switch, oh, let me turn off this slope solver here. Okay. So now I'll switch over indicator B over to the HMA. So now you'll notice that, right, I have the HMA and an indicator A and an indicator B, and of course now there's no output, and that's because, right, they're both the same indicator. So what we have to do is we can use this displacement parameter here to set indicator B to be the 5th bar back. Alright, so if I put a 5 in the displacement, basically now indicator B is looking at the HMA, but it's looking at the HMA 5 bars back here. So it's now it's looking at where the green dot is. So now, if we look at this, now, if this area here, see, like this pullback is kind of like our condition 2 that we're looking at, well, we can see that now if we're using this solver, you know, on our HMA, we can see that it has told us that in a general sense, you know, price is moving up. Even in this pullback situation, price is generally moving up, you know, and so we can see that that this technique did kind of delay. What it did is it delayed looking at the downswing of our HMA. It kind of delayed it. It kind of pushed it past, you know, past this area, this pullback, where we're hoping to know that in a general sense, right, that price is moving up. So if we're looking for this pullback and then looking for price to be sloping up, you know, essentially everything is kind of in a long situation during this pullback, and so this would work for us. And so I'm going to apply the same technique to some of the other moving averages. So let me copy this solver, and I'll switch this new solver over to the zero lag EMA. And let's see, yeah, I'm using the 14 period zero lag, so that's good. I need to switch this one over. And so now we can see that using the zero lag, this technique is giving us a long output or a long condition, you know, this entire move up in price. So if we compare this back to this to the slope solver, so let me turn this off. If I turn the slope solver on, right? Remember, the slope solver told us that, you know, we did have a couple of bars of a down sloping situation. So you can kind of see that using this, you know, using the comparison solver and comparing 5 bars back kind of gave us what we're looking for. It was looking for this general, you know, movement here. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing now for the zero lag EMA on momentum. So the white moving average down here on momentum. So I'm going to copy this solver, turn the top one off, and I'll work on this new one down here. And let's see, it's right down below. I'm using a 12 period zero lag EMA. So let's change that over to 12 period. And next I need to nest the momentum indicator into it. So I hit the nesting button. So just remember, when you want to nest an indicator, don't double click, otherwise it sets it as the main indicator. Alright, so let's change this over to the 21 period. Alright, so we have indicator A set up. Now I just need to go modify indicator B. Alright, change the period on the momentum to our 21, and there we go. Alright, so as we look at the chart, Right, we can see that technique worked pretty good here. Right, giving us a long output this entire movement of the momentum indicator. Versus, right, versus kind of like, here's the kind of like the first level, here's kind of like the first technique, the first derivative technique is just, right, using a slope solver with just plugging the momentum indicator into it, right, and we can see that it's a little, the output situation is a little choppy, right? We're getting a down slope, then an up slope, and a down slope, and an up slope, right? It's kind of back and forth, and then kind of like a second derivative of that would be applying a moving average, which would be the zero lag EMA onto the momentum. And so if we look at that slope solver, we can see that kind of smooth things out a little bit. It's not quite as choppy up and down, but we do have, right, these couple of short output situations here. It worked a little bit better, but now with this third technique here, we can see that it smoothed it out even more. So that's really kind of what I was wanting to show you guys today. So I think that kind of wraps that up. So I'll see if there was any questions. Let's see. All right, so Mike is asking a good question here. So in the select indicator window, so let's pull this up. So let me, I'll use this momentum slope solver. So he's saying in the select indicator window, so that is this window here. So this is BloodHound's indicator window, and it says select indicator. So Mike is saying in the select indicator window with BloodHound, plots list long confidence through short signals. What is this for? Okay, so what Mike is talking about is down here where we have to select which plot we want to use. So Mike is talking about this long column and the short column. So Mike is wanting to know what are these for here. All right, so let me set something up here, Mike, to give a better demonstration, because this moving the momentum only has a single plot output. So this is not a good indicator to provide you an example with. So let me switch over to this MACD here. So we can see I have a MACD on the chart here, and I'm just going to change the color of the difference, make it a little bit brighter. All right. So I'm going to use something simple. I'm just going to grab another slope solver, add that to the bottom, and so only this slope solver is on, and let me give it a name, MACD, since we're playing with the MACD, and I'll switch our indicator over to the MACD. So here's kind of the example I wanted to provide you. So with the MACD, right, you can see the MACD has 3 different plots on it, right? And so what I have on the chart is the blue line is the MACD line, the purple histogram is the difference, and I have the average is turned off, so we don't actually see the average on my chart. But what I want to show you is, like, I can use different plots to evaluate the long or the short confidence values. So I could use the MACD line to look for, I can use the MACD line to calculate the long output of the solver. And I could use the difference plot to calculate the short output of that solver. So when I click OK, now if we look at BloodHound's output here, now when the MACD line, when the blue line is sloping up, that is when we're going to get a long output. So we can see like over here, right here, right, our MACD line is sloping down, and so therefore there's no long output. And as soon as the MACD line begins to slope up, right here, right, we're getting a long output. Now the difference line, so when we're getting this short output, that's coming from when the difference line is sloping down. So as we can see, the histogram is sloping down right there. Now, since I'm using two different lines to to calculate the long output versus the short output, you'll see that occasionally we get a let's see, the circle was not good here. We'll get a bar that has both a long and a short out on the same bar, right? And that is because if we look at our histogram, right, the histogram is pointing down, but our MACD line was pointing up. And that's why we have a long and a short on this same bar here. Right, so on this bar right there. So I guess to back up, the way BloodHound is working is that it is calculating this long confidence or this long output totally separately from the short confidence or the short output. They're two totally mathematical calculations. Right? They're two individual plots, and so therefore they're calculated individually. Right? So BloodHound is actually calculating two separate formulas to calculate the long output versus our short output. And so in doing so, you have, right, a long column and a short column. So that way you could use different data. Essentially, right, these plots are just it's just data, right, numbers. And so you can use a different data set to calculate your long output versus a different data set to calculate your short output. Right? Normally you're going to be using the same. Normally you'll be using the same data set to calculate your long and your short. Right? So normally, right, we'd have them both the same, so that way we can tell when our MACD is sloping down and sloping up. But there are a couple of indicators, and let's see if I can find one here. I think, let's see, I think one of these ADX VMA indicators has two different plots. Alright, what I'm doing is I'm looking for an indicator that there's like some moving average type indicators where that were custom written, and what the programmer for a visual effects, when the moving average is sloping up, right, they color it green or blue, and when it's sloping down they're coloring it red. And some older techniques, they broke that into two different plots, two different plot names. So I'm looking for an indicator that might be like that. And that'll kind of help explain another reason why you need to have a long and a short column to select from. Okay, I think I found one. So this TS Supertrend, yeah, the TS Supertrend. So I can see on the plots, this plot section here, right, I have a downtrend plot and an uptrend plot. So let's take a look at that. Alright, so from the TS Supertrend, alright, we can see the red plot and then the green plot. So if I take a look at that in BloodHound, I guess once again I will use another slope solver here. And I'll switch my indicator over. So we're looking for the TS Supertrend. There we go. Alright. So we can see that it takes two different plots, right? So this indicator is broken into two different plots. So if I wanted to know when the uptrend is sloping up, I'd have to have this box checked for the longs, and I'd have to use the downtrend plot for the shorts here. Let's take a look at that. So now we can see, so when the downtrend of the indicator is actually sloping down, we can now detect that with the slope solver. And of course when it flattens out, right, there is no downtrend anymore, so there's no short output anymore until it slopes down again. And then of course the vice versa for the uptrend here. Alright, so even when the uptrend plot flattens out, once again there's not going to be any kind of output there, but since some indicators do this, that's kind of a secondary reason why you need to have a long column versus the short column here. So, alright, Mike, I hope that answers your question. So Mike J is asking, can I reference a non-numerical indicator that is green for accelerating volume and red for distributing volume, plus a third color, black, for pausing volume? Well, Mike, that depends on how the indicator shows up inside a BloodHound. So having this TS Super trend on here is kind of a good example. And let me show you what you may have noticed. That, see, in this indicator there's a BoolSeries called the trend, and a BoolSeries, it never shows up on the chart. And there's also other ones called a DataSeries or a INT series, which stands for integer series, and those all hold kind of values that BloodHound can read. So so this trend doesn't show up on the chart, right? But BloodHound can use it. And a BoolSeries it's a true or false value. So a BoolSeries doesn't hold numeric values, it holds a true or false value. But in computer language, true or false is converted to 1 or 0. Right? So 0 is false, 1 is true. So this BoolSeries in effect holds numeric values of 1 or 0, and that's it. So let me show you like how you can use a BoolSeries here. Let me turn that solver off, and we're going to use the threshold solver. So let me name this. And we're going to access the BoolSeries. So if I select our long and short for the BoolSeries, and what I need to do is put a 1 in A on our threshold settings, and next I need to come down here, and you'll notice that in our output, in our long output and short output, right, they're all set to 0. So we're not going to get any kind of output from the threshold until we at least set one of these to 1. And so as soon as I put this, at 1 or greater on our long side, right, if we look at the output now, we can see, we know when the TS supertrend is in an uptrend, like so. And of course, when the supertrend is saying we're in a downtrend, there's nothing. And so to get the downtrend detected, what I'll do is I'll put a 1 down here, and let's see, there we go. So I'm going to set the rest of these to 1, and there we go. So now we're using that BoolSeries to know when the supertrend is in an uptrend or a downtrend situation. Alright, so Mike J, that is how you might be able to access that indicator. So let's see, it's a volume. Okay, so it sounds like it's a volume indicator. So in that volume indicator, you might see a DataSeries or an int series, in which case you can use those for to perform calculations in your in BloodHound here. Okay, so let me get back to Mike K's secondary question. So it sounds like Mike wants a kind of a run through on all the BloodHound parameters inside of the indicator window. So if I pull this up, and alright, we have BloodHound selected here. Alright, so on the top here is our template name. So we can see that the name of the BloodHound file that we're creating right now, right? We can see the name up there. We can also see the name on the chart, right? The button that's on the chart. Now, if we wanted to, I could click on the button here, and you can see it opens up the BloodHound interface, and I could go in and I could load up a BloodHound file that I've already created. I can go in here and load that up, and but I don't want to do that because I already have a BloodHound window open up here in the background. Oh, you have to be kind of careful of that. Let me cancel out. Alright, so this setting here show the racing stripes. The red or the green background coloring are the racing stripes. So if I turn that off, now you can see just the BloodHound panel is now colored. It's not coloring your entire chart like this. So you can turn that on and off. We have the ability to play a sound. So when a signal comes up, right, you can set this to true, and then you have to go and select the sound file that you want to use. So this will open up inside of NinjaTrader's sound file folder. So these are all of the default NinjaTrader sounds that come with it. I know there's a bunch of other sound files, I believe, up on Big Mike's and maybe up on NinjaTrader's download section as well. And so down here in the signal section, we have compare long and short confidence. So to give what this does, I guess I'll describe it first. So what this does is, if we have a bar that has both a long and a short output on the same bar, if we set this to true, then you notice this new field shows up. All right, so I'll turn that off. That field disappears if I set it as true. What this does is this allows us to set a ratio. So this 1.5 would mean that if we had a short output and this long output on the same bar, either one of those outputs will have to be 1.5 times greater than the other output in order to get a signal. So we could make sure that, for example, the long side is 1.5 times greater than the short side, than the short confidence, before a long trade will actually take place. So let's see, to kind of give an example here. Let's go back to this MACD slope. And let me offset these long and short calculations. And great. So we can see on this bar here that we have this bar here, right? We have a long and a short output. And so if I set this to true, click OK, and hold on. Let me turn the racing stripes back on. There we go. Right, so we can see the racing stripes are on when we have just this long only, but as soon as we get this long and short, right, we can see the racing stripe turns off. In other words, there's no signal. That's because the long or the short, neither one of them is 1.5 times greater than the other, and so therefore there's no signal occurred. Now, most systems, it's kind of rare that this is ever really needed. But if you are building a system and you notice that you're getting long outputs at the same time you're getting short outputs, that's when you might want to use this condition here. All right, the long and short threshold. what that does is, let me make these plot lines a little brighter to see. Alright, so now we can see the alright, the dashed green line and the dashed red line down below. And those lines are set by these threshold values. And right, so now I have mine set to 0.9. The default setting is 0.8. So think of this 0.8 as 80%. Right, so this 0.8 is 80%. And in order to get a signal, BloodHound's output has to be greater than your threshold value before you actually get a signal. So let me take, I'm going to take one of these slope solvers here and modify it a little bit. Alright, so what I've done is I've added a requirement of the zero lag EMA, right? So now I'm looking for when the slope of that zero lag EMA is at least has a slope of 1 tick or greater. And now when we look at BloodHound's output here, right, we can see how the output now is starting to vary. So it kind of has this analog outlook to it. And so look here, remember the white line, what we're analyzing is the slope of the white line here, which is the zero lag EMA. So right here we can see that it's sloping up. However, we're not getting a long signal on this sloping up. And that's because we can see the output here. If we look at the flag, the output of BloodHound is 0.76. So it's below our threshold value of 0.8. So there was no signal occurred, right? It's telling us that the slope, that the indicator is sloping up because we're getting a long output, but the indicator is not sloping up strong enough to actually get a signal. We can see on this, the previous bar back, right, the output of BloodHound is 1. So that's 100%. So it's telling us that the zero lag EMA has a slope of 1 tick or greater, because the output is a value of 1 or 100%. Now, the next bar, since our output is at 0.76, what BloodHound is telling us is that 76% of our condition is met. So in other words, the slope of the zero lag EMA is a little bit less than 1 tick. So it's 76% of 1 tick. And so what we can do is, BloodHound has a fuzzy logic built into it. And, oops. Let me pull up the indicator window here. So if you're using the fuzzy logic built into BloodHound, then you can use these threshold solvers to say that, I need at least 90% of my conditions to be met before I want a trade signal, before I want a trading signal. And so that's what these thresholds allow you to do. So a lot of systems, people are just working in kind of a digital type situation, which, right, so a digital type situation, is basically how I have most of these slope solvers set up. I'm just looking for any kind of slope up or down. You know, if I start putting in some slope requirements like I did here on this slope solver, if I start adding a slope requirement, you know, of 1 tick, then I'm starting to work in a fuzzy logic kind of situation. Alright, so let's keep going down the list here. Alright, so this data section, well, this is just NinjaTrader stuff right here. So all the documentation on this is in NinjaTrader's help documentation. So I'll skip that. Same with the visual. All the visual stuff these are all NinjaTrader settings. So I'll jump over that. The lines, well, these lines, this value is calculated based on what my threshold values are. If I change this long threshold to 0.8, and I'll leave this one on 0.9. If I click OK, and now I'm going to open up the indicator window again, right? I see now that in the lines section here, I can see that my long threshold now changed to 0.8, and my short is still at 0.9. You know, so this section here, once again, this is really kind of a NinjaTrader section, but it's there so that you can control the color of it, you can set the thickness of it. That way you can determine if you want to see these lines on your chart or not. All right. So let me put this, I'm going to put that back at 0.9. And then of course we have the plot section, and once again this is a NinjaTrader created section here. But if you want, you can change how BloodHound looks. Right, we set BloodHound to produce a bar output. You know, so if I'm using really thick bars like this, I can go in here and make this plot width a lot thicker. Apply that. So now you can see my long bars here are a little thicker than the short ones. You know, if you really want to do some weird stuff, I guess you could go in there and change your plot style. You know, some of these plot styles work and some don't. You know, you can see if I'm using the block that I'm getting these little blocks on the 0 line. So when the long output equals 0, I'm getting blocks, you know, on the 0 line. So you can go in here and, you know, play around with this if you want. If you want a slightly different look. But the bar output does seem to work best, and that's because when the long output value equals 0, right, you don't see any green plot there, so there's a little less distraction. So, all right, and for now these other plots are not doing anything. They used to do something in version 1, in like the first version of BloodHound, but we have since discontinued these, and I'm sure in a later version we will hook these plot values back up, and they do kind of serve a purpose, but I guess I don't want to get into that now since they're not working. Alright, so Mike, I hope that answers your questions there. And so these are good questions. So let's see, next one is David. Alright, so David is new to using BloodHound and is pretty much confused. What is the best way to learn in a systematic way? Alright, so David, when you first installed BloodHound, you would have noticed that it opened up a web page, and that web page is the tutorial section of getting started with BloodHound. Right, so you know, I'm kind of guessing that you probably didn't take much of a look at that. So what you can do is, if we open up BloodHound's interface, so I'm going to click on the button up here on the chart. Right, so I guess David, to kind of back up a little bit, after you add BloodHound to your chart, as soon as you add BloodHound to any chart, you'll see this button appears up here. And this button, the name, the text on this button will change depending on the name of your system. And since the BloodHound system, you know, since we gave it this SI training workshop name, that's what shows up on the button. So anyways, so if you open up the interface, you'll see there's this help menu. You can click on this, and we'll click on documentation, and that'll open up your web browser like so, and it takes you to the documentation page. And what I would suggest, you know, if you want a quick overview, you can look at the quick start guide, and down here, let's see, oh, sorry about that. It looks like Jeremy took down this. We used to have a short little video, but yeah, we had a video on here, but it's pretty outdated, so we took that video down. But you can see here there's this getting started section, so I can click on this button to get into this getting started section, and it is also available over here. We go, this BloodHound guide. You can see there's a getting started link here, so this button and this link will take you to the same place. And oh, there we go. So we move the quick start video onto this page, and so, you know, this is like I think this is like a short 12-minute video. Just kind of gives you a broad overview of using BloodHound, and it has a quick crossover system that you can kind of follow along with, just to kind of, you know, get your hands on and starting to use BloodHound. And then you can continue down and just essentially just kind of go through these sections here. So this first section takes you into some tutorial videos, so you can go into the tutorial videos and just kind of watch them, and they'll take you through some various stuff. And then once you kind of go through these tutorial videos, you can back out and let's see. Alright, so in step 2, this next section, this really kind of gets you into the nuts and bolts of stuff. So if I click on this more information, so now here, this will take you through previously recorded workshops that explain how each of the solvers work. Right, so you can see this first video here will explain the bar direction solver, the bar length solver, and the indicator change in slope solver. So this will take you to that video right there, and you know, we can see here in BloodHound that first video is the first top 3 solvers here on this whole list. So all of these videos down here will explain, right, provide you tutorial information on each of the solvers in this list here. So that'll give you specific information on each video. There's a couple of tips and tricks in here, and then there's this building a system. So there's another video here that walks you through the broader scope of putting a whole system together and then putting it into Raven and running it as an auto strategy, or basically, or back testing it. So this kind of gives you a broad overview of the whole process of putting a system together and back testing it in Raven. And then there's some more detailed videos on using Raven as well. So, all right. So, great. Okay. And then again, David, hopefully you know by now. Once you kind of get started, if you're having troubles figuring out, how to put some of your trade conditions together, you can always send an email in, right? So you can always send an email in here to support and kind of ask me. Feel free to, attach any kind of screenshots to help you explain it. And of course, you can bring your questions into this live workshop that we're doing now. So. And I guess let me also show you guys here. So, oops, let me bring up the BloodHound interface. Sorry. So if I click on Help, and if I go to, once again, if I go to the documentation, so back on this documentation page, if I scroll down here under BloodHound references, right, there's this installation, updates, and licensing page. And so I can click on installation here, and this will walk you through the installation of installing BloodHound, and then the licensing here walks you through on how to install your BloodHound license, to activate it, and so forth. So that's available to you guys as well. I am out of questions, guys, and I really don't have anything else to cover. Well, yeah, you know what? I'll go over some basics here on the BloodHound interface. So for this workshop, I've only been working in the solver tab. And, if I turn on a bunch, let's see, let's just turn on all of these solvers here. And, yeah, so here, when I turn all of these solvers on, you can see now I'm starting to get both a long and short output at the same time. And so kind of back to that previous question where I was explaining, all the settings here in BloodHound. Let's see, so I have here. Let me knock these threshold values down to 0.8 or 80%. And you can see I still have this compare. Let me pull this over. So I still have this compare long and short confidence set to true. So we're looking for at least the long side or the short side to be 1.5 times greater than the other. And yeah, so we can see right here we have a long output, and it was strong enough. It was, yeah, so the long output is at exactly 0.8, and so we got a signal out of it, even though this short output was at 0.3. So 80% is 1.5 times greater than this 0.3. See if I can find some other examples here. Probably not, because all the solvers that I built are pretty fast moving averages, so I don't think I'm really going to find any of these solvers in conflict, giving me long and short out together. Alright, I think I found a way I can demonstrate this long and short comparison a little better. So what I'm going to do is knock my thresholds way down to 0.5 or 50%. And alright, great. So I found an example. So right here on this bar, so I can see BloodHound's output is at 0.5, so it's at least touching our threshold, but we're not getting a racing stripe because the short output is too great. It's too the short output, the value is too great, so it's at 0.4. The long output is not 1.5 times greater than our short output, so therefore we're not getting any kind of signal here. So if I turn that compare long short off, now we can see now we're getting a long signal here. We're getting a long racing stripe now because we're no longer comparing this long output to the short output, and since the long output is touching our threshold, so therefore we're getting this long signal now. So alright, well guys, I have not seen any other questions coming in, so with that I guess I'll just wrap this up.